Greetings. I'm Emery Edwards, and I'm the Outreach Director here at EdChoice. EdChoice is a national nonpartisan organization committed to ensuring every family has the freedom to attend whatever educational option that works best for them. We are intellectually honest, trusted experts, forward thinkers, and most importantly, believers in parents. We strive in our work to educate, train, and engage parents and the public and policymakers on the benefits of educational opportunity so that all families have the access to build successful lives and collectively a stronger society. We hope that you will join us in this conversation around educational options for all families to ensure that parents have access to whatever option works best for their children. You can find out more information about EdChoice and our work by visiting our website, www.edchoice.org.
Well, hello. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Candace Pate, and I am the Vice Chair of Curious Ed. And I have some wonderful guests with me here today. These are all parents and just some wonderful mothers. And I have Elizabeth Nelson, Chantel Edwards, and Ashley Burden, who will be just joining us to discuss some different topics in regards to my children are now online learners. Now what? I didn't sign up for this. Just as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed significant gaps and inequities within our education ecosystem. So as the schools have shifted to remote learning environments, parents were forced to just step into the role of being the primary teachers for their students while juggling just career responsibilities. For some parents, staying at home to assist their children with remote learning was not an option, as their jobs were considered essential and they actually had to go out and do remote work opportunities. And so today we're just going to have a discussion about just the new challenges that have become more stressful on most households as parents as we navigate through just the different scenarios on how to ensure that our children are having adequate support for schooling. These challenges have also shown just the resiliency of parents, and just some have come together and pulled resources to have tutors or learning pods. And this panel discussion will just give legislators some personal perspective from some of the challenges that parents have had to face, and just some insight and some insight and suggestions on what could have helped parents adapt easier just during this time. So we're just going to go right into it and just have a discussion in regards to how, as parents, you're adapting to everything taking place, and just some things that have been helpful, and just some things that you've had to adjust as a parent in regards to everything going on. So Elizabeth, I'll just start with you. How did this initial fall remote learning affect your household, and were you able to easily adapt to this remote learning? And did your school provide some necessary resources? So I know I asked several questions. I can come back to that. Just mainly, how did the initial just response to it affect your home?
Yeah, so I'm a working mother. I was lucky enough I have a job where I'm able to work from home, but I would say my son is a social kid. So it really was difficult for him not being able to, I think, have that time with his friends, and especially starting a new grade and having, he was excited originally to be able to, meet new people and see who his new teacher was, and just interaction, I think, is the main thing that's missing. It took us a while, to be perfectly honest. Yes, the school did provide us with Chromebooks, so we went by and picked that stuff up ahead of time. But it took us a while for me to get used to checking his homework and making sure that, because there's schoolwork and homework, so they give them time during class while they're on remote learning. They give them time to do their work, but there's times that maybe if they can't get to it, because he has to then do it after class. And it took me a while to get on a schedule with him where I would be able to know that he's missing work. Or it took the school a while too, you know, I think we ended up getting Google Classroom. So now they send me, I can get how his schedule is throughout the week. At first though, we didn't have those things. And I didn't know when he was missing a lot of the things that he was supposed to be turning in during the day. Luckily though, he's a AB student and we still managed the first 9 weeks with A's and B's, but it was a rush for the finish because I didn't think with some of the grades he was getting, we weren't able to, he wasn't able to make, I think, the best that he could, just being distracted here at the house and it just not being a typical learning environment. I will say the last thing though, they've been super adaptable with us as far as retests. So if there's a test that that's given and he doesn't score what the teacher knows that, or his past even for him to have, he doesn't score what he's usually known to score, they usually give us the opportunity, or they have been given us the opportunity to allow them to retest on a certain day. And they can't get 100, but the highest they can get is an 80. And if they get anything like a 70 or 80 or below, they're able to retest to get an 80.
That's actually really nice. So what grade is your son in?
Yeah, my son's name is Miles and he's in the 3rd grade.
3rd grade, okay. And just as we continue on through the conversation, if you choose to share about it being a public school or private school, charter school, learning pod, feel free. If that's not something you want to share, you don't have to. I think the level of learning is making a difference as well, just because for me, I know I have 2 children. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. So elementary and middle school. And I can tell you, I see a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
And just their experience. And I have one in public and one in private, and I see a huge difference in that as well. Chantel, can you tell me about your experience?
Well, unlike Elizabeth, we have 3 little people at home, and they are toddlers and then early elementary. So when this all started, Emery, our oldest, was in kindergarten. So it was a drastic shift for a kindergartner to go from being in school all day to e-learning. And we are extremely fortunate to send our kids to a Christian-based childcare and pre-K that opened up its doors to the older siblings of their younger students, so that they had somewhere with a licensed educator to be able to monitor online learning for various different school backgrounds. So at the time, he was in a charter through the public school system here. However, there were kids from all different kinds of schools that she was able to open her doors to. At first, though, that classroom wasn't available. And so he was given a desk kind of in his own little area to do his work. And that's a lot to ask of a 5-year-old. So we found we were still bringing him home and doing work. And they did Zoom calls once a day or once a week for them with their teachers. And he was missing the Zoom calls at first because we couldn't get the technology at the school to talk to his tablet. Unlike Elizabeth, our school at the time has a lot of underprivileged students. They have a lot of students who are transient, who are in foster care, who are in homeless shelters. And so those students were all provided gear first. And so my husband and I, being in a situation where all 3 of our children have their own tablets, we have several laptops in the home, we have Wi-Fi on our phones, hotspots, we have Wi-Fi throughout our home. We just didn't want to take away resources from those families that we knew truly needed those resources. However, the tablet he has wasn't quite what it needed to be for schoolwork, but we made it work. So there was a lot of transition, and also with him being so young, there were definitely some attention challenges, as well as, like Elizabeth stated, they miss seeing their teacher. Kindergartners really seem to have a bond with their teacher, and so that led us to have to make some tough choices going into the 1st grade year.
And Chantel, I believe you're in the Indianapolis area. Elizabeth, you are where?
Sorry, I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. Okay. And so just hearing this information so far is just amazing, just the difference. Because was it a huge adjustment for Emery Chantel? Because I know Elizabeth said that her son was social, Miles, and that interaction he kind of needed. So going from being in school to remote learning, that made a huge difference. Because that social balance is important when it comes to education, because they need
Absolutely.
other people, and when they get that snatched away from them so quickly and they say, okay, you still have to continue doing this part, but you won't have this component with it, that makes a difference in them balancing out their just their education. Ashley, how would you say that worked for you and for your kids?
So as far as the school and their ability to adapt to remote learning, I commend them. I know when we first went into the quarantine, we were on spring break. And so they kind of had a 2-week window to get everything together and make sure they had the right platforms and all this whoopla. And we were blessed enough to have one-to-one technology. So all of our kids got Chromebooks. And my biggest thing in our home was because we were so blessed with them providing resources to keep them learning, and to make sure that the teachers were accessible. Like basically all I had to do was wake them up and log them into the classroom, and the teacher would take care of them for the rest of the day. They didn't have too much homework. So in my home, I just made it a priority to really put an emphasis on mental health and self-care, and just making sure, you know, because my kids are very social too. I think a lot of kids are, and I have 3. And I was still working. So immediately I felt the impact of the stress from all of this. And so it just became extremely important for us to like be very, very, very super intentional about just doing whatever we can that brings us joy, that takes us away from our computer, that gets us outside and gets us moving, so that we're not, you know, just sleep all day. Because it was very easy, like the first week, to just let my kids, like, I'm just going to let them get rest because we're on spring break, and then I give me some time to adjust. But then I seen that came back to like kind of bite me, because now it's like, eventually they got tired of just sleeping all day, and I needed some kind of system. And I think what really helped us on that piece is just bringing them, just us coming together and creating a schedule together. So it's not just me imposing my own set schedule on them, but, you know, bringing them alongside this and having them have some sort of input on what their day was going to look like. So yeah, I just been all about mental health. That was like my biggest concern. And honestly, I have pretty smart children. Like they normally get A's and B's. So that wasn't my top priority, honestly, as a parent. I was more so concerned just with us being surrounded by so much grief and like literally going through a double pandemic with what we were facing with the coronavirus, and then also with losing so many Black lives in our community. So and the kids are seeing that. Like, I don't know about y'all kids, but my kids are on TikTok a lot. And ever since the pandemic has hit, a lot of adults have switched over to TikTok. So now they're being exposed to a lot more of what's going on in the world. And so, you know, just making sure we're having these conversations about how we're going to continue to take care of ourselves so that we can continue to bring our best, you know, put our best foot forward in the work that we're doing in our schools and in our community.
Ashley, you bring up some really great points. I think that oftentimes when we think of mental health, the kids are left out of that component, right? Not thinking that this is affecting them just as much mentally as a child as it's affecting you as an adult, you know? And I think that it's really important that schools take into consideration that all the things that are going on around them, as well as their academics and this big change and shift, let's not act like this isn't happening. You know, let's talk about this. Let's have discussion about this. Let's get you involved in that discussion, and let's see how you feel about it. And so what I really will commend, because I have one in private school and I have one in IPS, that here in Indianapolis, they actually took the time at my daughter's school. It's a Butler Lab school. It's an innovation school. They really just start having true just conversation about it. What does Black Lives Matter mean to you? Because that really affected just my daughter and her thoughts. Like, I can't focus on school because mommy, this person died last night and by this way, and I can't really focus. And I'm thinking, like, why is this affecting her so bad? And then she's like, we can barely go outside to play. And when we go outside, we have to worry about these masks. So I'm just like, she can't focus on school because she has all these other things going on. And I guess, you know, as an elementary kid, as a 10-year-old, I'm like, how is this really affecting you at that level? And I think taking that time to think about mental health, having that discussion and letting them be involved in the process is very important. I think as we go back into the second phase of just this remote learning, I don't know if all of you got the opportunity, but my kids went back to school and now they're being pulled from school back into this remote space. One is like, yay, I get to sleep a little longer. And then my 12-year-old, who is like in private school, she is very structured. So she goes, you know, these teachers need to log on time. She is on there at 7:30, like, where's my assignment at? They post stuff at the last minute. So, you know, you got two different types of kids in two different settings, one saying yay, one saying no. How are you guys kind of adapting to that? What is the energy like going back into something that you came out of? Were you comfortable with them kind of going back into the building, knowing everything that you knew, Chantel?
I was just going to add to what Ashley said earlier too. One of the other adjustments that I didn't even think about until she started talking was how much education we took on at home. You know, how much you had to think about recess time. You had to think about breaks and snacks. And I texted his teacher and I said, you know, God bless you. Like, I had no idea what all it takes to teach a class like every day. Like, I get it, but I didn't get it. We always did our best as a family to send Valentine's Day candy and Christmas cards. And, you know, we always did teacher, you know, appreciation. We always did our best to show her how much we appreciated her, but I had no idea. And so in the midst of the pandemic, things were just starting to open up a little bit more around May, June timeframe. I took her and let her get a pedicure from us because I was like, we have to do something for you, because after 2 months of taking this on myself, I can't. This was not my calling. So I just wanted to share that was something I forgot about. I spent a lot of time at the stores trying to create science experiments, trying to bring home kits to put things together, little flower pots they could paint. We went through 3 bubble machines from March until July, like just everything we could think of to kind of bring home that classroom experience. But to answer your question, Candace, we went through a major transition in our home because one of the things you and Ashley and Liz both spoke to was having children that are a little bit older. So for us, I have never been more grateful to have toddlers because there's so much of this they don't understand. There's so much of this that they miss. So we didn't have to have too many of those Black Lives Matter conversations. We had a little bit with Emory, but not as much as what the 3 of you would have had to encounter. So I was beyond grateful. But how do you explain coronavirus to a 3-year-old at the time? And she's wearing a mask to preschool in and out of the building. And then they're like, well, you have a cool elephant mask and let me see your mask. And then there's masks. And it just is, it's a totally different animal when you have little people. But going into this school year, as a family, we sat down and we looked at all the options. Staying at the school he was currently at, were there any schools that were going to continue in-person learning, and was e-learning our only option? So we actually totally changed his learning environment. So we chose to move over to a private school that was doing in-person learning. So when he started first grade, it was important for me for him to not have to spend 6 hours in front of a computer every day. Our oldest does not learn well without the interaction. So we chose to send him back in person, but to a totally different school. So for him, the transition was more going from what he knew and only having 1 year of school under his belt to going to an environment we didn't know as well, neither did he. So we have been able to be in person this whole time. There have been a lot of additions to that, not just because we were going from a charter to a private, but in order to keep the children safe. There's a health app we have to fill out every day by 8 a.m. And they get green, yellow, or red rating on if they can enter the building. Parents are not allowed in the building at all. So our back to school night was virtual. So there's been a lot of minor things to keep them safe and to prepare him. But with that also came a lot of social change. We went from a very diverse ethnic environment, a very diverse male and female ratio at his charter school, to a very not diverse environment and a all female teaching staff with the exception of 2 this year. So we've found other challenges on top of the coronavirus issues or, protections. And now being faced with doing all that to only at Thanksgiving break, we'll find out if they will resume in person when they return or if they will go back to virtual. So we did all that thinking and praying and resourcing and talking to make the change that we thought was best, only to now, half a semester in, be faced again with having to possibly go back to e-learning. And so it has been a roller coaster. And so now we're at the crossroads of, okay, we know his previous school is doing e-learning again as well. And if this private school goes to e-learning, do we just send him back to what he knew and to what had elements that we highly appreciated? Or do we ride the wave and finish the year out where he is?
I think that you hit on some very important things. I kind of battle with the same thing that you do. When you're in private school and paying for private school to get e-learning, but I have to be honest, my e-learning experience, in which I'm going to be curious to how you adjust, is been 2 totally different things. My daughter attends St. Richard's. It's a private school, and we pay for that versus IPS, and it's a public school. And my daughter may get on about 2 hours, 3 hours a day with IPS. With private school, it's almost as if she's walking in that building and she's in that building all day long. I mean, even for lunch, they will have them turn on their cameras and eat lunch together. When they do recess, they have recess is actually like a little free space and time, but literally they have to be with their cameras on 8 o'clock till their school day ends at 3 o'clock. And the only break they get is for recess. And so with my 7th grader, my 12-year-old, just used to some structure, she absolutely loves it. Seeing what my 10-year-old or my 5th grader does, she's like, okay, this is not, she says, I don't know how they do that. That would like drive me crazy that the teachers don't feel like it's important for them to come on and interact with me. But that is why I can say that I am actually happy, because each child needs something different and I am getting what I'm paying for, but it still doesn't, justify that I'm paying a mortgage payment for her to be doing e-learning. Elizabeth, tell me about your experience. I know that you started in it and you went back to returning to school. Now you're going back into it. What are your thoughts? Do you feel refreshed? Do you feel okay? Do you have any qualms in regards to going back to that you feel like that they could do better?
So with my son's school, it is a public school, but the area that I live in, it's a World 1B school. So he's there with a ton of well, speaking of, because I think Chantel mentioned the demographics, my son is in school with a lot of Asian, Indian, in Dallas area. That's actually where the demographic of my neighborhood, to be honest. So I never put him back in. So we had that option here in Dallas ISD to either every 9 weeks, we had the option, which I love, to either stay with at school or traditional learning is what they're calling it, or either remote learning. And I kept him back. So this will be our second 9 weeks where he's doing remote learning. And Miles has adjusted really well to it. The only thing I wish that the school would change, just to answer that question, and well, just to backtrack, I don't know if in the next 9 weeks, just with this current, with no vaccine and no, end in sight, at least to me. I mean, we hear everything that they're saying they're going to do, but what does that really mean for, my family in particular, right? Like, are we going to vaccinate? Are we not? So I'm still unclear if I'm going to allow him to go back. Dallas is a different beast, if you guys know what's happening, like we were saying, in the different areas, but Dallas our governor is not shutting anything down. So schools are still open. And I just like the idea, though, that I'm able to make the choice. That's the one thing I love about his school, is I'm able to say, no, I don't want him to go back, or yes, I do. And the teachers have been very flexible with that. I think if I could change one thing, it would be, more communication with the parents, because I'm going to start going back to my office full time. I'm here remote now, and I'm not working I'm not every day, I'm not having to log on. I'm a hotel executive. So right now we're not necessarily taking events and, or planning any meetings. So the small amount that I do get, I'm lucky enough to be able to be home while he's home. My parents are also awesome for him. I know not everybody has that, right? Where you can, lean on your parents, but I am nervous about going back. And this is I don't think this is one of the questions at all that you asked, but because there isn't a plan in place if I get sick when I'm at work, and then when I have to come home and then quarantine, or how is that going to work, right? Do I trust the nanny going in and out of the house to come back? I mean, we haven't really touched on coronavirus as much, but it's a scary thing, right? So it's that in itself is giving me pause to allow him to go back. But then, like I said, me coming in and out of the house in December poses a larger threat to me, and being around everyone, because I'm nervous I may be able to carry and maybe pass that on to my child. And then what happens then, right? If he's out of school for a few. So I think we don't have a plan in place with his school for that. And there's been a child I know that was exposed and then ended up testing positive, and he's been out for 2 to 3 weeks. And they're usually great with communication, but I don't know what's going to happen with him. So I'm nervous, I'm thinking ahead, like any parent, I think, but I'm thinking well, what happens if that happens, it's going to affect his grades. And I know that that's something important to him. Of course, it's important to me, but how am I supposed to navigate through those waters is kind of where I'm at when you ask what I wish they would change. Like, I don't even know what the answer would be on how they could communicate to us. Can you make up the work? I mean, those things haven't been answered yet. So,
and then just catching up, what I've seen with the people who have caught COVID or tested positive, just their body's weak. They don't have energy, and then trying to catch up or make up for the time that you're down, and then that affecting your grade. My kids were really active in sports, and having that balance, I think Ashley did really well with. And I heard Chantel talk about just those mental health breaks. My kids were able to still participate in some outside sports at a certain capacity, but just that socialization, I apologize, is important. So how is Miles getting that in? And then I'm going to transition to you, Ashley, after she responds.
They do allow them, like you were saying, they get to do everything. I mean, they call them brain breaks here. And so every 5 seconds, I'm trying to work and he runs out because he's like, brain break. And he's pretty animated. So if I'm on a call, that doesn't usually work well, but I think everyone's adjusting to having kids at home and trying to do work. he gets a chance. They log on. I know he logs on probably, they're supposed to be on by 7:45 every morning for homeroom. And he can log on as early as 7:30 to talk with his friends and, you know, just to, they catch up on Roblox and, you know, the stuff that they're, YouTube, you mentioned TikTok. That's the other part, having to pay attention to what they're watching, right, on YouTube. And it's because it's become, so during his breaks, he's able to talk with them. Lunch, they can eat together if they want. It's interesting though, because the school he's in, I feel like it's constant curriculum talk though, because they may read a book together from Epic, which is this like online book, for children app. And so they'll talk to each other about books that they both have read. And I send him usually during his breaks. He's a loner though too, when I think about it. He plays well with himself. He's a self-soother. So sometimes I know Epic allows me to also send him books to read and to track where he's, you know, how he's doing. So I'm always shooting him new books, and it's a fun shared experience for he and I, you know, to also discuss the books that he's read and things like that. But for the most part, he hasn't had any interaction with other kids physically. So he was supposed to join sports. He was supposed to play soccer and baseball this spring, and I'm not letting him do it. So it's one of those, he's not complaining though. I know Chantel knows, because I always post about him being the Corona cop or the Corona corrections officer, but he's very afraid of the, you know, Alexa, YouTube keeps me posted on what the numbers are with coronavirus, like, you know, how many deaths, and it's I think it's frightened a lot of kids. I don't know about you guys, but it's frightened Miles enough to where he doesn't he knows, I guess he misses it, but he doesn't miss it enough to become positive, if that makes sense, or to catch the virus.
It's funny you bring that up. I coughed 3 times, I think, last night. And both of my daughters immediately put on masks.
Yep.
And I was going to make a post about this. They put on masks, and they have had on masks until I had to get the COVID test done. I have a procedure coming up soon. And so they were like, until you get your results back, Mommy, no offense, we will have a mask on while we're in the house. So.
Oh yeah, he shoots me with the temperature gun when I wake up. It's like in my face before. It's literally, sometimes it's overwhelming. He sprays all the mail. I mean, the kid, I'll say this, the one thing about mental health, even though that is pretty funny, that if you're coughing on Zoom, Miles will run by and say COVID, and I'm like, don't do that. Like, yeah. So he's very much so, I like that he understands it, but then there's a piece of me, and I was reading an article recently about, you know, what that's doing to our kids, like that they're going to now grow up so afraid, right? I mean, OCD is one thing, but I mean, now they're not living a normal, you know, kid life. And I'm sad about that. So yeah.
Ashley, going into the spring semester, knowing kind of now with Thanksgiving break, I know for Indianapolis, it's kind of like some started on the 18th. Some on the 23rd, some on the 30th. It's going to full remote until January. Are your kids looking forward to this, knowing that you have these fundamental breaks? Is it difficult? Or are there some things that you wish they would have done different, or they could do different, knowing all of what we learned from the first set of quarantine?
Yeah, so I'm gonna just lean heavily on I didn't sign up for this part of this segment. Like, so once they gave us the option to send our kids back, mine was gone. They was the first ones there. I couldn't take it. Like, there's no way that I could successfully work and manage 3 different grade levels. And at the time, they were doing several different platforms as well, because they still hadn't streamlined that part. So, like I said, we sent them right back. I was concerned because a part of me felt like that we were going to come back to online learning. And I'm really big on providing some sort of stability for my kids. So that did concern me. However, I was more concerned with making my kids hate school. And they were ready to go back because they were ready to see their friends, even though we have a lot of kids in our neighborhood. And I would let them go outside and play with them. You know, they would social distance themselves. But I sent them right back. Now, we started back with e-learning last Wednesday. And it was very vague as to why we had to go to e-learning. and they sent out this letter saying that there wasn't enough staff to accommodate all the children. And then I got sick. And so I've been walking around my house with the mask since last Thursday. Just really bad. I'm mad. I missed so much over the weekend, and I got my first COVID test on Monday. And it was just kind of like this whole big thing in my house. And, you know, my kids were extremely worried. And it was like we had a celebration when I found out that I was negative. But I decided to, instead of sending them back this week, this would have been their last in-person week. I decided to keep them home because I didn't know if I had COVID or not, and learned that they really couldn't accommodate me keeping my kids at home. So I'm like, what have y'all been doing with the kids who are fully virtual all this time? Like, I became really concerned. But they're excited about staying online because it's, for them, a shorter school day. For me, I'm not so excited because, like I said, just I think, Elizabeth, you touched on it, just there's like a lack of communication on really knowing what they need to be completing and turning in every week. I have a schedule for them on when they need to sign in and all of that, but just knowing how to stay up on all 3 of their classes, that's been my biggest concern with moving forward with this. But I think we're in a good space where we can, you know, figure it out. We're going to figure it out. And I know one thing coming into all of this, when the pandemic first hit, you know, everybody was talking about this new normal, what's it going to look like? In my mind, I automatically noticed like, hey, this is a great time for us as parents to show that we're like true partners in our kids' education. Like, y'all can no longer look at us as just like a deficit. Like, you know, you need us just like we need you. So how can we work together? So I just been really, again, intentional about everything and not prescribing to what they feel like we should be doing. And more so, you know, like I've been listening to you all and hearing the different things that they're offering your school. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I need to find some parents that want to do this so that we can advocate for this in our school. Yeah.
Exactly.
So like, how can we use this to create our own new normal? Like, I'm not okay with going back to how things were. And the way that things are starting to shape out, I'm not okay with that either, because it doesn't sit well with me. Like, these kids, they still need to be learning. They still need to have expectations. But my kids attend a charter school with an advanced curriculum, and they are not trying to lower anything. The job I had before, they weren't trying to lower any expectations. It's kind of like, you know, just go, produce. This is what it is now, and I'm not okay with that. And so, yeah.
So Ashley, if you were speaking just directly to policymakers, what would you say to them about how they could help families just during this time? Because you bring up some really great points. I think that, you know, what I receive because I'm paying for school should not be something that I don't receive because I'm not paying for it in a public education. I think every child deserves the right to a quality education. And because I'm paying for it doesn't mean that then, you know, I receive the quality education because I pay for a private school. It's not fair. What about my other child? Now, we chose the options just based off of their learning style, but then when put into a very tough situation, I learned that, you know, one wanted to offer me more than the other.
Yeah, and you make me think about another thing that I've been reflecting on this since all of this has started, was just what school choice really is, and what it, like, the school I chose is not what it looks like now, kind of what Chantel hinted to and why she felt the need to switch her kid's school. I wanted to switch my kid's school, but I didn't really feel like I had too many other options that were available and accessible to me, and even consider homeschooling, but would need additional resources in order to make that happen. I've watched organizations fund different learning pods with community centers and having places for children to go, but I haven't seen too many offer support to families who want to create their own learning pods at home, or who wants to get a tutor for their child. So just how can we like reallocate some of this funding to provide more resources to families like directly in their hands. And then two, again, I became like really big on mental health since all of this has started. And one thing that I've noticed, just in my school, at my charter school, we have a few police officers. We have on deck, at every school. But here it is, we need mental health support, and there's no therapist in our school. Like in the high school, there's a guidance counselor to help with college pathways, but where's that help for those kids like who need that additional support and that can get that support without having to go through all the bureaucratic mess of getting help from these nonprofit organizations and because there are different contracts available where you can have people come in and service your kids, but I can only imagine the process that you would have to go through to even be able to, because I was this close to, I'm gonna just be transparent, I was this close to losing my mind. And
as an adult,
yeah.
Chantel, how has this affected you? And if you have the opportunity to share something with policymakers, just in regards to things that can help or things that can improve, what would you like to say?
All I could think of when Elizabeth shared about the 9-week choice and that their district was being very mindful about choices is Indiana needs to get on board with that. Indiana is supposed to be one of the states that has the most amount of programs, the most amount of choice available, a state where there are huge choice movements that are located here, headquartered here. And to hear that another state in some capacities is doing it better, excuse my language, but it pisses me off because I have 3 Black students, 2 male, 1 female, that are already disadvantaged just because of the color of their skin. They are already disadvantaged just because they have a 2-parent household when so many others don't. There are so many things that can be seen as negatives that are positive just because of the environment and the community and the country that they're growing up in. So that alone just gives me pause. And our oldest, like Ashley and Elizabeth and you have all shared, he's extremely bright. He's reading at a 3rd grade level in 1st grade. He can do engineering projects. He does Kiwi kits. He will take a Capri Sun cardboard box and turn it into a maze with glue and tape and scissors. That's all he had. So when I look at him in comparison to other students who are on that level, what makes me sure that the playing field is being leveled for him? What makes me positive that if he would come up against a subject where he starts to stumble and we're at home, that the county and the state that I pay taxes to is going to support him without, like Ashley shared, all the red tape. The bureaucracy is just crazy when it comes to certain things. So what I would say to a legislator is work harder on educational savings accounts. Work harder on making sure that choice scholarship income level is raised, because it's a lot easier for single parent households with multiple children to get a choice scholarship as it stands than someone who, like Elizabeth, who makes a higher income but only has 1 student. Why should she not have access? And for us, right now, we're a 1 income household because I've had to take a step back career-wise because we're in a pandemic. Nobody's hiring. And for the places that are, I'm not willing to put my family at risk in order to just bring in income. But even with 1 income, there's still a lot of limitations. So I would say focus on those 2 things, because educational savings accounts give us that flexibility. They give us the dollars that belong to our children at our disposal. They give us the dollars that we're paying these counties, and we have a mortgage. So when we look at their mortgage statement and we look at the tax breakdown, our township gets a healthy chunk of those taxes. Our son is not in a Lawrence, our son is not in his district schooling. So he's not receiving anything for those dollars we're paying. So you need to work on the education savings accounts first. Second, you need to look at the choice income limits and how to raise those so that families like Elizabeth, families like ours, and especially Candace and you and Ashley with multiple children who at one point in time, Ashley, you had different choice school environments, and Candace, I know you currently do. Where's that help? Where's the assistance for them?
I'm sorry, you bring out some really, really great points. And there were a group of friends of mine that just got angry and frustrated that there was no movement taking place. And there's 6 parents that got together and they created a learning pod. They actually hired a licensed teacher, and she teaches the 5 to 6 children, and they rotate homes. They came up with making sure that the kids had science, and they learned about African-American leaders when it came to history, really heavy. They learned about just hands-on experience when it came to science. And so it's just amazing to me how if you put it out there, there may be other people with the same mindset that you have, but just for policymakers and legislators, you know, it's really important that you know that we may need resources and financial backing to make this happen. And since my child does come with a dollar value that is attached to her, you know, in regards to her education, it's my child, it's my choice in regards to what she's learning, at what capacity she's learning. And some of these people outside of having that support stood up and took charge. But those are people who have that financial backing to do that. What about those people who are sending them to the local schools who don't have access to a computer, who don't have access to internet, who don't even know enough themselves to know if what they're learning is actually quality education, you know? So you think about all these things and you think about these test scores, and I will be interested in seeing in comparison to last year versus this year, how are the test scores going? How are our kids adapting to just everything going on? Because my 10-year-old child made a good statement, the one that's in public school. She goes, we used to go to school for almost 8 hours a day, and now they only make us get on here for about an hour a day. So did we really need to be at school all that time, Mommy? I'm like, you know, versus private school, they're like, you still gonna get these 8 hours because I still want the full amount of money that you're paying. And it really shouldn't be like that. I need the same quality on both ends. I still have to work an 8-hour day.
But
my job won't cut me a break. Come on in, Elizabeth, and share what you would like.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say really quick. What's interesting is I sit on a board for a school, and then my child attends a different school. And the approaches to testing are totally different. The testing at the school I sit on the board for is monitored. There's an educator that's paying attention to, especially the younger students. Are they really reading the sentence, or are they just clicking to the next question? Versus where we're paying for him to be, his test scores were below his kindergarten test scores. There's no way possible that that should have happened. And part of it is because the supervision wasn't there to make sure that these first graders were doing what they were supposed to be doing. So when we circle back to comments that Elizabeth and Ashley and you have all made, if those resources were there, homeschooling may be an option, because Elizabeth could vet and could interview and could make sure that the health measures of the tutor or the nanny or the licensed provider were there, and she wouldn't have to worry about it, especially when she has a child who is being very particular about coronavirus. All of that could be put to rest if the resources that she's already paying for were given her to use at her disposal. And like Ashley mentioned, homeschooling. I would love to join a homeschooling pod if I knew that I could back it correctly, if I knew that who was leading it was a licensed educator. However, how do you pay for that? And especially, Candace, with you already paying for a high tuition rate and then a public school rate, how do you work that in, even if you pulled her out of that private school and dedicated the resources you're currently paying to put her in one of these pots? Because as it stands, legislators, there is no law, there are no boundaries, there are no rules or parameters when it comes to homeschooling and these education pots. So again, how do we make sure they're getting what they need to get, but still have the freedom to make the right choices for them? And so I just wanted to comment that between what you and Ashley both said is the biggest question is, how do you navigate what you really think is best versus what you have to choose between what's offered to you versus necessarily being able to select what you really think is best.
Elizabeth, you had something you wanted to share?
Well, yeah, I mean, just listening to you talk about the pods, I think that's an awesome idea. But from what I gathered from what you said, it's mothers that put that together, right? So I think for me, legislatively, and I'm surprised they haven't banned me. I stay writing Ted Cruz. Sorry, I crossed my eyes. I stay writing Ted Cruz. I stay writing, you know, I have 2 senators here. And, you know, it's interesting to me that you spoke about, like, you know, us teaching our kids about current events and things like that. You know, defund the police keeps coming up and everybody gets angry, but like no one seems to get angry about defunding education. And to be quite honest, public schools and, you know, private schools, like you said, they all should be receiving the same type of education, right? But the problem to me is those funds are allocated to, I don't care if I am a high wage earner. To me, my child I shouldn't have to pay college tuition for 3rd grade. I just don't believe, I mean, that's why I moved where I moved, right? So we already are doing the things we need to do to move to the right school districts where we can to make sure that our kids, you know, I did to make sure that my kid could go to a great school. But like, why, to me, the teachers and the educators and, you know, the Betsy DeVosses, which don't get me started, but they should be the ones, to me, that are coming up with these pods, right? Like, they should be the ones. I think, to me, right now, it's all about, when you say what we need to talk to legislators about, it's finance. You know, the resources, if we have the money, right, we can always get the resources. But the fact that you're having to come up with things, or the parents are coming up with things on top of carrying, you know, 40 to 60 hours a week, maybe at work, it's unacceptable to me. So I don't know. I'm not against private school by any means. I think it's a great option. And I think that, we should want, I don't know, I don't want to get to the whole, the police should not be making more. We shouldn't keep pushing billions there, but then our kids, right, continue to suffer. And I hate to say, we're so ignorant as Americans that we're not, maybe it's because of the defunding, right, of education, but we're not even focused on that, right? Like, we're not looking to say, this is what I need in order to vote for you, or... Well,
you bring up so many points that I think can take me on a whole nother angle. Well, I mean, because, I mean, even something as simple as saying, okay, if our kids are being pulled from the building, and you're not having to use the money that you're getting per pupil to pay for utilities or those costs, why can't I have that money to bring in a tutor or someone to help my child in regard to their education? Because my job is not being as considerate to the fact that I have to come over here and explain this, because all they did was get on and tell them what assignments they were going to have to do. So I'm being a cook, because I still have to cook lunch. I'm a janitor. I'm a teacher. I'm a nurse. Yeah. So, you know, I'm doing all these tasks in addition to, for me, a wife, and just working. And so, you know, it's like, when do I get my chance to breathe? Because COVID's going on. We're all trapped in this house together. And so Ashley's mental breaks come to mind, like, okay, I need to start thinking about mental breaks for the kids, and I need to start thinking about mental breaks for myself, because, you know, it can be overwhelming. And I will say, for my child in public school, because of the Title I school that she's in, they actually sent home some funding for support for food. They don't think about the fact that my utilities have gone up, my grocery bill has gone up, my patience level has gone down, because you know, these are just real conversations. You opened up so many things that I'm just like, I
On
guess.
top of those normal outlets being shut down. So
Right.
for a while, parks were shut down. The Children's
Yes.
Museum is shut
Yes.
down. They're all of the things that are normal outlets for you as a parent to say, go play over there for 5
Yes.
minutes, as well as, or I can go and run on a treadmill. Well, I'm walking, but some of y'all might be running on a treadmill. And they can go to the children's care, portion.
Yeah.
Like in the height of the pandemic, all of those things were shut down. And for us with young children, there's even more restriction because
Right.
at least you guys meet the minimum age requirement for some of those things. Like we are members of the YMCA. Only kids 3 and over could go to the child area once they did open it back up. So that still limits us as a family. That means one of us has to stay at home with the youngest while the older two and the other one can go. And so even when you look at ages of kids, there's that issue. And so Candace, to your point about Title I funding, what you have to think about as well is we protect as we should our children with learning disabilities. We protect as we should our children who are autistic or our children who have physical limitations as we should. Then on the flip side of that, when you look at our high ability students who have the same rights to that Title I funding, it is a much harder battle for us to have to fight to get access to that funding in Indiana. I can't speak to Texas, but in Indiana, it's a harder fight to get access to that funding. So even though high ability students have just as much rights to access to Title I, it is a much different journey to get to Title I in Indiana. So when you don't have a physical or mental limitation that a doctor can write a letter to. So that's also an element to think about is for those of us with high ability students, you do have rights to that or part of that funding. However, it's just a journey. And so that makes me think about all of our families and all of our students in the situations we all find ourselves in. And the only thing that I can say is we're going to have to continue to create these Zoom calls. And I know we have, Zoom fatigue is a real thing.
Yeah.
But if it's nothing but an hour or two on Saturdays or Sundays virtually, just getting families together, and like most things when it comes to our government and when it comes to educating our children, the parents are the ones who get together and bond and create the forces that ultimately make the change. We may not see the change for our children, but some of the change that the three of you fight for, our youngest, who is currently 2, he may see it. But our 4-year-old and our 6-year-old for sure may not see it, but it takes us, unfortunately, to really make that change. So to all of your points about parents no longer being seen as an issue or an obstacle or what we're doing or what our children are facing at home and then bringing to school, is now all at home with us. And so, now's our time.
I think it's important, though, really quick. I know we probably need to, but I
Yes.
think it's important to say the Zoom calls are great, Chantel, and I think the pods are great. I think more on the lines of our Zoom calls should be more focused. I think we did a great job. It's something we don't talk about enough, but I think we did a great job this past election, right? I know we're still in it, but this past election showing the power of our vote. And I believe that if we don't talk about that and pinpoint that specifically and really get people, I'm happy what happened in Georgia happened because I think it shows, our community that this is what you have to do, right? Like if you say, these are the things that I need from you in order to be, right? We showed you we can come out, but now I'm going to need you to do these. I think it's time for us because other communities, I've grown up around them. They push their legislators and they push their mayor, their governor, right? Like they push all of these people. And if they don't do what they ask them to do, they withhold their vote from them, right? And I feel like this is a turning point for us, at least I'm hopeful. I feel like our conversations and our Zoom calls as, you know, Black mothers needs to be focused on, and I'm saying this because it ties into the whole coronavirus thing because we're disproportionately affected, right? So it's like we need to now say, okay, this happened to us, it shouldn't happen again, right? So the next time this happens, what is being done specifically for our children, right? That are in these, because none of you, the ones of us that are on this call don't necessarily have impoverished kids, but I do a lot of work in the community for them as well, right? And that they've suffered more than all 4 of us, right?
Amen.
And
Amen, 1,000%.
And I feel like if we take care of them, you know, it's going to, of course it ends up, the pie gets larger for the rest of us that are a little bit more, I hate to use the word privileged, but more privileged than those that are impoverished. But
I think you bring up some really good points, you know, Elizabeth. As we close, I just want to bring up the point of knowing what it is that our kids need to survive and making sure we stay active and current on that. Make sure that we have a voice and decisions that are going to affect our families. But oftentimes when you get too far up the ladder, you really can't relate to real life issues that other people are facing. Even the 3 of us on the call, there are parents who are actually dealing with some real life issues in regards to their kids' education that we would be blown out of the water about because we're not at that level. Sometimes it's hard to think about just some of those experiences that people may be going through. And so oftentimes when you think about policymakers, it might be very important to do a listening tour. It might be very important to see what are those pain points for the community so that you could really work just as an educational system to try to alleviate or at least heal. We realize you can't get rid of everything, but are you at least listening to some of the things that we're dealing with so that you can actually be developing and creating things that actually can address the issues that are on the table? Because if you're creating this this format that you think is going to work for everybody, that's not realistic. That really only works for your higher level. Think about the lowest level, think about your highest level, and think about tiers of support that can happen so that everyone has a positive effect in receiving a quality education. I realize that we're low on time right now. I really want to thank each of you for coming out today. And I apologize if I've gone way over my time, but thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing all the information that you shared. And I look forward to hopefully hearing from you guys again. Maybe this is something that we could do, if not monthly, quarterly, just to kind of check in with each other, just to stay abreast to just different things that are working in your particular areas that may be effective for our families and that we can share in our own communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ornaments create time to hang. Gingerbread builds tradition. A string of lights sparks family ties. A last-minute gift makes a lasting impression. A tray carries your heritage. And an ending means a new beginning.
I felt like when I took the full-time role, not only was it Walmart like inviting me in to like join the team, but I also felt comfortable here.
Over 95,000 temporary COVID hires hired permanently since March. Live better together. Walmart.